So we just spent a bunch of time in Scandinavia, going across Norway and then Denmark and a little bit in Sweden before ending a trip in Germany. And from what we observed, the future of what transportation and especially cars looks like is what Norway has got right now. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about how Norway got to this point, why they are leading the world in new EV sales, and what the US and other countries can learn from them to speed up their own adoption of electric cars. So stick with me and we'll get into all of that.
So Norway is absolutely the future of what car ownership is going to look like. Almost every car here is an electric vehicle, from Tesla to i3 to Mercedes EQC.
All right, so I'm sitting in our apartment in Bergen, Norway, and out the window, parked on the street, I can see a full range of electric cars. There's a Kia Niro, a Hyundai Ioniq 5, two BMW i3s, and both a Tesla Model 3 and Model Y.
There's so many BMW i3s here too, which I can't believe because they did very terribly in the US. Although they kind of make no sense because their range is abysmal. But as a very early on EV, I guess you have to give them some credit.
So I think that this is what the future looks like, and it is fully electric. With demand in the US growing, and now California and several other states following and banning of the sale of internal combustion cars by 2035, the US might look a lot like Norway in just a few years. And I am personally looking forward to it because I think these cars look great and are way better to drive than their internal combustion counterparts. So Norway leads the world right now with 75% of new car sales being EVs in Norway. And just to compare elsewhere across the world, it's 4.2%, and US is only a little bit higher than that at just under 5%. Norway is aiming to be 100% EVs by 2030. So I've always been super interested in cars. I used to be really into reading big blogs, following each manufacturer's roadmap, and tracking new cars that come out each year. But then between getting busy with the kids and cars stagnating quite a bit, I stopped paying so much attention. I also love technology and keeping up with the latest and greatest in phones and gadgets, but in the last few years that's also become boring as the market has largely stabilized and there's less development happening there. But in the meantime, the car industry has been getting exciting again with new models for EVs that are pushing the boundaries of design now that they're freed from the constraints of designing around engines and drive shafts and transmissions. So a lot of cars are being completely rethought from the ground up now. This is also allowing a lot of new entry into the market from startup companies as well. In the US, people are starting to branch out more to EVs, but almost all of them are Tesla. While you see a good number of them here in the streets in Norway, including even a good proportion of the taxis, they're not even close to the cars that you see the most often here. Europeans have traditionally tended towards smaller cars, so the ones I'm actually seeing the most here are either Volkswagen ID.4 or ID.3, which we don't even get in the US, and BMW i3, which you see every once in a while in the US, but the short range has largely kept people away, and it's largely been seen as a failure in the US. But they're just absolutely everywhere across Norway. But there are also just as many Porsche Taycans. They even get an awesome looking station wagon version that we don't. There are Kia Niros, which we technically have, but I've only ever seen one. And I thought it was a much more exciting car when I first saw it. They have tons of Hyundai Ioniq 5s and a ton of Mini Cooper electrics even. There are Polestars, Volvos, BMWs, Audi e-trons, Skodas, and electric Opels. There are tons of Nissan Leafs, a car that gets too little credit for bringing a mass market EV with good enough range, and is now being killed off in the US. And even the city buses are electric. We've seen almost as many Mustang Mach-E's here in Norway as we have at home as well. So a big reason for all of this is that the infrastructure itself is much better in Norway. Most people don't commute very far or go far from their home charger, so fewer public chargers are needed, but even the fast charging situation is way better because there are far more chargers pretty much at every highway rest area. Instead of the competing networks between Tesla and everyone else, the Tesla stations already use CCS, which is the same standard used by every other manufacturer. And despite being a country rich from the offshore oil fields, Norway has made it incredibly easy for people to live with EVs with great electricity rates. And so at first I thought that this had something to do either with income or environmental awareness, but it turns out those are not the case. So Denmark, by comparison, which has very similar levels of income and environmental awareness, is only at 16% new car sales going to EVs. So it's not just those factors. It's also not tax incentives, which I thought might be a big factor in Norway. Germany and even the United States have more incentives on electric cars. And Germany only has 13.5% new car sale adoption for EVs. And as I mentioned before, the US is under 5%. So the tax incentives are not what are solely driving it in Norway. What the biggest thing really is gas prices versus energy prices. And so gas prices in Norway are not so much higher than they are elsewhere across Europe. In general, Europe has way higher gas prices than the US, largely due to fewer tax subsidies, but also just because the sourcing of it is a bit trickier in Europe. And in recent days, with the war in Ukraine and sanctions on Russia and some of the big gas pipelines getting shut off, gas is getting even more expensive there, although it's also affecting energy overall. So in Norway, 92% of electricity comes from hydroelectric plants, and that's largely from the fjords and glaciers that they have there, and a lot of infrastructure that was built out and has continued to be invested in and improved over the last 100 or even more years. Norway has the cheapest energy as a result in Europe, other than Croatia, Hungary, Bulgaria, Estonia, and Malta. Way cheaper than many of the other Scandinavian countries, and especially the other Northern European countries. And so as a result, the cost per mile for gas is about 19.1 euros versus about 3.5 euros for electricity. And so with such a difference in the cost for a gas car versus electric, there's just huge incentive to save money by going electric and being able to save money on a very regular basis with filling up and keeping cars charged. Norway is also the largest exporter of energy in Europe as a result of it. So one of the interesting things that I found while we were here was that a lot of people are talking a whole lot about the war in Ukraine and the geopolitical situation with Russia, not that dissimilarly to the US, but their focus is much more on the impact that is having on energy and electricity costs, as well as the inflation that it's causing, more so than in the US, where inflation is just sort of seen as a more general thing that's occurring right now. And so everyone is worried about what's going to happen with the pipelines getting shut down and more sanctions coming to Russian gas and electricity, and what that's going to mean for prices overall. But in a way that actually might lead to more adoption of EVs in Scandinavia if they can keep the prices as low as they are right now, being so energy independent. And so now in the US, with California banning the sale of combustion engine vehicles by 2035, and a dozen states looking to soon follow suit, the US might actually start to look a lot like Norway soon. So even before this move, EV sales were picking up and demand was so high that most manufacturers couldn't keep up. Customers are waiting months and even years for some EVs. Manufacturing will, of course, eventually pick up, and more will shift focus from mass production of ICE vehicles to EVs. And with it, our streets will start to look a lot more like Norway. Hopefully that'll also mean more variety in the cars that we have. So for as much credit as Tesla deserves for shifting the market and making EVs cool and desirable, they aren't the only option, and more competition is definitely a good thing. The companies that have embraced this change, like in my opinion Ford, Kia, and Hyundai, are already seeing huge rewards and huge demand and huge sales, so hopefully others that haven't shifted focus will start to do so soon. Customers need more options across the range of vehicle sizes, prices, and range, and the Volvo offerings are pretty similar right now, with almost everything being either a compact crossover SUV or a large family sedan. So more options coming along will bring more people into the world of EVs and allow them to replace gas cars. So in order to get there, though, our infrastructure needs to come a long way. Our country is built around the car, with huge proportion of the population requiring a car for daily commuting and getting around. We don't have the same public transportation infrastructure as Europe, nor do we embrace cycling anywhere near as much. It'd be far better if we could actually build infrastructure for these, but that seems pretty unlikely at this point. With so many people living in suburbs and rural areas that need range in their cars on a daily basis, we're going to need more charging infrastructure as part of the complete switch that's going to happen. We need charging to be as ubiquitous as gas stations are now. Unfortunately, we're a long way from that, and so far the install rate of chargers is being far outstripped by the EV sales. And to further complicate it, there aren't many places, whether in dense cities or out in rural areas in the country, where it just won't be feasible to get enough space or power people to charge up. Many people also don't have the ability to charge at home, especially owning apartments, so we'll need tremendous capacity for charging all the cars that will soon be on the road. Norway doesn't have this problem anywhere near as much on the same scale, so they haven't had to address it as much. But when the US shifts, it'll cause massive problems if not addressed soon. So I love walking around the streets of Bergen and other towns in Norway and trying to identify all the futuristic looking EVs. They may not get Lucid or Rivian cars like we do right now, but they have so many other makes and models that we don't have access to. Since those cars don't have to adhere to traditional car design built around internal combustion engines, they can look quite different and unique. Many have unique paint colors or flashes of electric blue, which seems to be the standard in identifying an electric version of a car. Even the delivery and business vehicles tend to be electric versions of the trucks that we have. I saw a brewery delivering beer from a Polestar, and I've seen countless electric buses, trolleys, and trams. It feels like the ICE vehicles are the odd ones here, a relic of an older time. Soon the only ones on the road might be marked as historic. So I'm looking forward to the US following suit soon. I think EVs are way more exciting, both visually and performance-wise, than ICE counterparts, and I love driving mine. We're still at the beginning of the adoption, and right now most manufacturers are trying to make their offerings similar to non-EVs to make it easier for people to adapt. Tesla, now Rivian and Lucid are probably the furthest from traditional cars, but they're still very recognizable in a similar way to cars. With EVs though, since the whole drivetrain can be made as a skateboard with motors and batteries under the frame, they can really look like just about anything. So I think in the future we'll see some more manufacturers, probably startups at first, and then some of the other legacy manufacturers that maybe want to stand out more, trying completely different designs that don't look anything like cars do right now. So what the US can learn from Norway is that energy independence and subsidizing clean energy production and removing gas tax incentives can go a long way to driving adoption. If we can change the equation to the point where energy is cheaper than gas per mile, which it pretty much already is right now, but if we can make it even more so to a similar degree as Norway, where it's almost 7 times cheaper for energy than it is for gas, that will shift a lot of people from gas to electric cars. We also need to improve infrastructure to remove concerns that people have right now around trips and availability, and especially building out the fast charging infrastructure and networks around the country. Wandering around Norway to me feels like living in the future. There may not be jet packs or flying cars, but I can glimpse what the future of cars in the US will look like. There's more pressure to get there quickly, and customers have clearly shown that they want to get there too. If we're able to increase competition and build out the infrastructure quickly, the future of the US may look a lot like Norway does in the present. I don't care much about autonomous driving and robo-taxis, but give me a future where EVs are the prevalent vehicle on the road, or bikes or even trains, I would gladly take as well, and I'll be quite happy. That, or maybe I should just move to Norway based on how great it is there. So with that, I hope that some of the things that I saw in Norway might be illuminating to other people. I think they have really done a great job of shifting the adoption of electric vehicles. And it's just really cool to walk around and see so many of them on the road with so many people, doing all kinds of different things with them, whether it's, a tiny car just moving around one person, if it's something for a business, doing deliveries, even, picking up and moving tons of people around with public transportation. All of that is just amazing to see, and I hope that the US will get to that point relatively soon as well. I think Norway stands as a great example for the rest of the world right now, not only in terms of just the pure number of EVs on the road, but the way that they are prioritizing clean energy, shifting people toward better infrastructure and cleaner ways of transport, and making it pretty friction-free in the process. So I hope that the US can follow suit and that we'll start to look like them soon. So with that, if you found this interesting, please do give it a thumbs up. If you find this overall type of content interesting, please do consider subscribing. Helps the channel grow quite a bit and helps me keep doing this. And last but not least, please do feel free to comment below. Let me know, what do you think about how Norway is doing? Is it something that other countries should be emulating, or are there other things that we should be learning from them? And what other things can we do to get more EVs on the road and shift more and more toward what Norway and the other Scandinavian countries look like? All right, thanks so much. I will catch you in the next one.